All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. Shakoch Rabbi Grodner. I really like the image of being in the middle of the eye of the storm, as where we are in the incredible story of the Jewish people. I used a bit of a different image, but I think to the same point that Rabbi Sachs says that the Jewish people are part of the greatest story ever told to all humanity. And when you're in the middle of a story, it's hard to understand what the next step in the story is or what the ending of the story is. But we know, and we've been promised, and we hold on to with our faith. We reach in with ourselves and try to connect to that faith and understand that the story has a happy ending for us and for everyone else around us. And even though we're in the middle of the story that it's difficult to be able to see out of it, we know that the story is going to end, please God, in a happy way. Let it be soon, let it be now. We had a very interesting poem over here. I hope everybody did as well. And one of the things that kept coming up over and over again is the shift that the Jewish people have gone through in the last 80 years or so. My wife, her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, Aleichem Shalom. They're no longer with us, but they made it out of the Holocaust and made it to Montreal, and thank God had very many healthy years there with lots of nachas from kids and grandkids, great-grandkids. But we were thinking back to what it was in Chernovitz those days 80 years ago, not so long ago, and how Jewish life was worth so little, and how the Jews had no opportunity or ability to be able to stand up for themselves against their enemies. And in the moment that we were sitting at the Purim Suda, drinking, eating, that there were Jewish fighter pilots manning the most capable and technologically advanced aircraft in the world, destroying our enemies, making sure that the Hitler of today cannot do what it was that the Hitler then did. We really are living through incredible times. And again, that's not to discount the challenges of being inside or being in the safe rooms and running around in the stress and challenge of being here. I'm feeling it myself on a personal level. But as I've said to the group many times, we reach down inside of ourselves and kind of dole out that wellspring of emunah that we have, that we build when times are good, so that we have what to hold on to when times are challenging. So B'ezrat Hashem, we can all delve into that. And the way that we build our well springs, that we fill them, is with water. Torah is always with water. Torah is water. And so that's what we're hoping to do here today, to fill up our well springs with more water, with more Torah. So on that note, Rabbi Grodner alluded to this, and I'm going to take it to put a little more focus on it, the Manishtana and the importance of Manishtana on Seder night, and specifically Seder night as necessitating questions. Now, when I first got here quite a few years ago now, in 2000, well, I got here in 2001, but I made Aliyah officially in 2003, and then I went to Ulpan Etzion. And Ulpan Etzion, they had a tekes for Pesach, and they bring everyone together. And the cool thing about Ulpan Etzion, I assume it's the same thing, is that there were young people in their 20s from all over the world. I think there were 28 countries where there were young people from. And you can tell everyone by the way that they dress and, who they're with during the break, what they're eating and drinking during the break. Every nationality has their own little specialty, the way they look and the way that they eat. But they brought us into this tekes for Pesach, and they have a woman playing keyboard, and she starts playing the tune for Manishtana, Manishtana, Laila, the one we all know. And everyone in the room, the Ethiopian, the French, the Algerian, just everyone, everyone knows the tune. It was unbelievable. I would be curious to know if there are any other tunes that are so, maybe L'Chadodi, but are there other tunes in the liturgy of Am Yisrael that really hold us together? And I thought maybe this sweet little tune is a part of what holds the Jewish people together, and what really makes, or is a part of what makes Pesach such a special, special moment for us. We understand it. As Rabbi Grodner had so beautifully, it's the diamond on the ring of the year. And it's not just that it's a cute thing that kids say at the Seder, but there's something very central about it, in that it requires us to ask questions. And so on that note, I'm going to share a text with you from the Gemara in Pesachim that discusses this, and we'll look into it a little bit deeper with Chassidus. Okay. As we do on Mondays, we keep in mind Dr. Dodi Tobin Zal. So the Shem should be an aliyah for her neshama as always. Okay, the Gemara in Pesachim says as follows. Lama okrin at the shulchan. Why is it that we take away the shulchan? Now, as part of the Seder, we take the table that's sitting in front of people. You might say, wait a second, how do they move the big table? Everyone has a dining room table. Well, the way that they did at the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara was that everyone had a couch that they kind of laid on their side. That was the furniture of the day. And they had these kind of TV tables set in front of them. Each person had a little table. So before the meal comes out, as part of the Seder, we take the shulchan away. So the Gemara says, well, what's the purpose of taking the shulchan away? It's kind of a strange thing. So Amar Debei Rabbi Yanai, the house of Rabbi Yanai answered as follows. Kadesh Yakiru Tidukot V'Yishalu. In order that they will recognize the Tinokot here in the Mishnah and the Gemara are not babies, but youths. So in order that the youth will say, wait a second, what's going on here? And they'll ask a question. So in order to induce questioning. Now here's a story that the Gemara tells in line with this. Abaya havayatev kame de Rabba. So Abaya and Rabba, even though they are famous chavrutot, Abaya was young at this point. He's much younger than Rabba, and he was sitting at the table, at the Seder table of Rabba. And Hazadaka Madle Taka Machme. So they took away the little table in front of him. So Abaya says, Amar Lahu, he says to them, Adayin lo ka'achlinan. Hey, wait a second, we didn't eat yet. Atu kai ma'akre tacha mikman. So wait a second, why'd you take my table away? I'm hungry, I want to get to that matzo ball soup. Why are you taking my table away? So Rabba's answer to this was, Amar le Rabba, Pachratan milomar manishana. Now that you've said this, Abaya, you've acted with incredulous nature. You've asked the question, we no longer need to say manishana, which is funny because who can imagine a Seder without manishana? So it's a very strange point here that the Gemara is making, but apparently whatever it is that manishana gets across, here my assertion is asking questions. So we did that already by this incredulous response to, hey, you took my table away. Why'd you do that? Okay. So what is it about asking questions that is so important and central to Seder night that we no longer have to say manishtana? What is it about the question that is also important for the telling of the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim? As we learned before from Rabbi Griner, the whole point of Leila Seder is sipur, to tell the story. Okay, so how is asking a question in this format of question-answer, why is this so central to the Seder experience? And how is it that this one question took away the need to ask any further questions? Okay, so with those things in mind, with those questions in mind, let's look a little bit further into some of these Hasidic texts that hopefully will spell out the answer a little bit. Okay, here's a piece from Rav Tzadok. We'll see two pieces of Rav Tzadok. Rav Tzadok HaKohen actually lived into the 20th century, was a student of the Ishbitzer Rebbe, and he has a sefer called Pri Tzadik, which is the drashot that he gave over on Shabbos and Yantiv that to his Hasidim. These are later in his life. Okay. So I'm just going to read this in English for time's sake here. So Rav Sadok says this means that the Seder must take the form of a question and answer. The child asks, Manishtana, and the father responds, as it is written. On this night, a person must experience something new within themselves, as one is required to see themselves as if they had personally gone out of Egypt. That is, on this night, a person should feel a strong inner awakening, sensing that they have been freed from their inner constraints, their Yetzer. Similarly, each person must feel on every Leil Pesach as if they themselves had left Egypt. It should not be treated as a mere routine, simply eating matzah and maror as a habitual practice. Likewise, the primary purpose of the first dipping, Tibul Rishon, was established, as the sages said, in order to create an awareness for the children, which is similar to the Gemara that we saw. The idea is to awaken a sense of wonder. Manish Tana, why is this night different from all other nights? To break out of routine and recognize that something truly different is happening. Okay, so a couple points from Rav Sadok, and the last I think is the most, let's say, the most broad as far as how to understand this. There has to be an opening, a sense of wonder that one experiences. There has to be a breaking of the routine. We have to understand that we're not just saying some sort of religious text, reading it as if we were just reading anything else, saying these things in order to yotzi us so that we get to eat all the food that we know is waiting in the kitchen that smells so good. There has to be something of an experience, a sense of wonder. So how is it, Rav Sadok says, that we open ourselves up to this sense of wonder, to the experience of Leila Seder? So he says that is through the question. The question itself is what opens one up to thinking about things differently. It opens up a space inside of a person. Okay, I don't know who this quote is from, but one of my rabbis quoted to me, and it's always stuck in my mind. And the quote is, "There's nothing less relevant than an answer to a question that no one asked." There's nothing less relevant than an answer to a question that no one asked. In other words, if there's no space inside me, if I'm not curious, if I don't care about anything, then the most deep, profound, interesting, powerful idea isn't going to resonate. There has to be an openness, a thirst for it. And that's what a question does. A question makes a space within me that allows for a new experience. Okay, a lot of you here are dating or hoping to date, or please God, find your zivug, or so Yonatan here, Baruch Hashem, has found his zivug. Okay, but the dating experience is one that necessitates questions. If there are no questions about the person that you just went out with, you're not going to want to go out with that person again. But if you think to yourself when you're walking home, I wonder what she thinks about this. I wonder what he thinks about that. Oh, he said this. I wonder what he thinks about that. Then the relationship has on where to move forward. So questions open up that sense of wonder, that space within us that keeps us from feeling something that's just rote. And there are two facets to that Rav Sadok says. The first facet is this sense of internal freedom, where I don't feel personally constrained by my own yetzer, my own desires that take me away from serving God. And second of all, this sense of I have left Egypt. I have been a part of this, right? This isn't just something that I read about. This isn't a story that happened to them, but it's supposed to be something that I experience through the evening, that I am coming out of Mitzrayim. I see myself. And the question, says Rav Sadok, is the vehicle through which we allow ourselves to be able to feel a part of the experience of Yetziat Mitzrayim as if we are coming out during that night. Okay, so that's a little bit about questions. Another piece of Rav Sadok here. This is a piece from Likutei Ma'amarim, a written piece that he wrote about Pesach as well. So Rav Sadok says, the concept of the exodus from Egypt occurring specifically through questioning is emphasized. As our sages taught, even a scholar must ask himself. And If one does not know how to ask, you must open the conversation for them. The idea behind this opening is that the person themselves should ultimately ask the question, because all true understanding comes through effort and striving. As it is said, if you have not toiled and found, do not believe it. Yet the Exodus itself appears to have happened without effort, as a divine gift of light, as the sages noted in Vayikra Rabbah, in the Midrash. These worshipped idols and those worshipped idols. And yet Hashem redeemed Israel out of a simple, unconditional love, as it is written, but I loved Jacob, quote from the Navi in Malachi, a love that defies logical explanation. However, in the retelling of the Exodus, that very same divine light is reawakened. In many places, speech is considered equivalent to action, as derived in the Talmud, from the verse, by the word of Hashem. For this reason, the story of the Exodus must be told specifically through questions, to demonstrate that divine light does not simply come passively. Even a small amount of effort is enough to receive Hashem's illumination. Simply asking the question is already considered effort, and therefore, even one who does not know how to ask must be encouraged to open their mouth and ask, and that alone is sufficient. Okay, so Rav Sadok, as he is known to do, weaves a lot of different midrashic and rabbinic texts together, but the similarity between all the texts that he brings are the importance of asking questions and the need for doing that, to the extent that our sages tell us that if a scholar happens to be at a Pesach Seder by himself, lo aleinu, that would be very sad. By the way, I never understood a situation like the Gemara discusses where someone would be sitting at their table asking themselves questions, as the Gemara brings down, until we went through Corona, where unfortunately we did have situations where people were by themselves on Seder night. And the Gemara says in such a situation, a sad situation though it may be, a person still has to ask questions of themselves. They still have to say, Manishana, or as we saw in the Gemara in the first piece, some sort of equivalent to that where they're openly asking questions. So Rav Sadok seems to say that without the questions, you haven't really toiled. You haven't really done the necessary effort. But through the asking of the questions, that is the effort that is required, one, in order to be zoche, to be meritorious enough to receive this special divine light that comes to each and every Jew on Seder night. Okay, in the deeper sources, it's known as Mochin de Gadlut, which I think sounds a little hippiest, but I think the way that we translate it is expanded consciousness. There's some sort of big picture vision. Kabira likes that. I like that too. There's some sort of big picture vision that we get on Seder night, where we're able to wrap our heads around things in a broader way that we're not able to on normal nights. Maybe 4 cups of wine helps that. Maybe a little matzah helps that as well. But the experience of Seder night, that coming out of Mitzrayim, is a big picture, a sense of the divine, entering the divine self, so to speak, into reality, and us being to comprehend something about that we usually don't. How do we get that? What makes us able to get that? Rav Sadok says, through asking questions. But wait a second, I said all the words. I sat down and we waited 2 hours to eat, and it smelled so good, and I know that, Safta's matzo balls are the best. Doesn't matter necessarily if you say every word. Of course the words are important. The words are very deep. They've been put down to our sages to help us. It's really a different topic, but really the Seder is the recipe book for the experience of allowing myself to feel that I am coming out of Egypt now. Okay, so of course all the words are important, but if you didn't ask questions, you didn't open yourself up to that experience of something new within inside myself, a space for something that wasn't there before, that sense of wonder that Rav Sadok spoke about before. If there's no space there, then it's not the proper effort. It's an effort that is for naught if one just reads through it by rote and tries to get through it. There's a need to be able to step back from that and be able to ask into that. And there's a cute quote, but I think it's actually quite deep, from Rav Shlomo Karlibach, who says, on Seder night, you open up your journals. We really have to bring ourselves to Seder night and to appreciate not just the experience of coming out of Egypt itself, but ourselves that we bring to that as well. And to open up those questions within ourselves, to look at the text and to look at the story from an analytical and conceptual perspective, but also to see ourselves in the story. We have to be coming out of Mitzrayim as well, as Rav Sadok said, from the perspective of our Yetzers, our own challenges, our own spiritual, emotional challenges, to be open and aware that we can step out of those, as well as the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim itself. So just to go back to the initial statement, how is it that we are Yotzi? How is it that Abaya, his simple asking of the sweet childish question, wait, you took my table away, we didn't eat yet. How is that Yotzi, the Manish Jana, the questions that we have to ask? Because the necessity of asking questions, that opening of a space of wonder, that opening that allows me to experience as if I came out of Mitzrayim, is the necessary effort that one has to experience in order to come out of Egypt. Okay, one more source here from Rav Shagar, and then we'll pause. It's translated by my buddy Rabbi Levi Morrow. So Rav Shagar says, the commandment to tell the story in the form of questions and answers is intended to inspire spontaneous questions in the child, like, why is this different? This question is essentially interested in participation. The story is not passed on to the son unless the son becomes interested in and immersed in the story. Moreover, the story is not speaking about, but rather leads to taking part in what is spoken. In the Haggadah of Pesach, we do not just tell the story. We also say that we are telling the story. The message is passed on not just by the full and interested participation of the child, but also in his being a part of the message itself. God said to Moses, go to Paro, so that you can recount in the hearing of your sons and of your sons' sons how I made a mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them, in order that you may know that I am God. We don't just recount what happened. What happened so that you can recount. If so, the Haggadah is a story whose content is the story of telling a story. It realizes itself while telling about how it is realizing itself, an instance of a story inside of a story. We are not recalling a story about something that happened. We are performing the story of the Haggadah in the telling of the story of the Exodus itself. The object of the story is therefore also the subject of the story. Okay, I know it's a lot of words here, but I think this is what Rav Shagar is trying to explain about the uniqueness of the Haggadah and the way that it is set up. In other words, most stories, when you read a story, it has a beginning, a middle, and end. You walk away from the story, and then you say, wow, that was an interesting story. This was unexpected. This was interesting. This was fascinating, etc., etc. Rav Shagar says, no, the Haggadah is built in a way so that your telling of the story is the story itself. In other words, it's built in a way so that we tell the story. We are in the story itself. You kind of jump into the text. You can imagine some sort of, Hollywood movie, science fiction, where the reader is reading the text, and all of a sudden, as opposed to sitting and looking at a book, they are transferred and to be inside the words itself. And they move within the story as one of the characters within the story, so that it's built in a way that we can actually experience it. Not that we read about it, we recount it, but the things happen then in order for us to be able to tell it. And the uniqueness of the story is that we are the subject of the story and not just the readers of it. So I would like to wish everyone, we still have a couple weeks, please God, we're going to be doing more preparation, but the opportunity for asking questions on Seder night. First and foremost, engagement. We want to make sure people are connected. We want to make sure people are present. When people are asking questions and they're engaged, we know that they're there. So that's first and foremost. But these questions, as Rav Sadok taught us, should open up a sense of wonder, a sense of being inside the story, a sense of real deep engagement with the story, as far as not just what was, but with what is. And really this sense of broader perspective and light that Rav Sadok taught us. That through the telling of the story and through being and seeing ourselves as part of the story, as the way it's built, that we can really get this broader perspective that can lend us to this sense of freedom, this sense of connection, this sense of truly, truly being in the story and feeling God's redemption on Seder night. I'll pause there, and if anyone has questions for the next few minutes, for myself or Rabbi Grodner, can welcome to do so. Thank you very much, everybody.
I want to thank everyone for joining. It was really a pleasure to be able to meet with you, although albeit by Zoom, but just the opportunity to discuss Torah with you and to hear the wise words of Rav Yonatan, that's really a delight. And we welcome any questions that you might have. Okay.